So, as a disclaimer, this video will be about the state of the game as of the 12th of August 2023. I will not be taking into account any articles after the state of the game article released last week, including the showcase. I have nothing against any devs, any players, and this is purely my analysis and opinions on the game itself. Also, the gameplay and video content will be vaguely related to what I'm talking about. However, I don't and can't get gameplay of something like a catch crash, so feel free to just treat this more like a podcast episode than some super well edited video essay. I will try to at least match things up, and I've got annotations if needed, and most of the gameplay will be uncut if possible. With that out of the way, let's begin. Destiny is one of the best and worst games ever made. On one hand, it's a game absolutely bursting at the seams with potential, amazing gunplay, raids, environments, and combines both PvE and PvP as core modes in the game, even including a mode that has both in one. However, it's an unbalanced, buggy mess with constant server issues, a loot grind that feels largely meaningless, abilities that trivialize most of the game alongside a passive 30% damage resistance for little effort that further works to trivialize everything, a seasonal model that feels the same season to season, and changes that actively make the game worse. Key examples being airborne effectiveness, skill-based matchmaking, and the like. And that is just a surface list of issues. So, I'm going to talk about the entire game today. Start with the timeline from Witchqueen to now, and then look at the game as a whole in its current state, and of course my opinions on it. So, let's just delve in. So, Witchqueen was actually pretty good. The story was probably the best example of writing in Destiny since the Taken King, which makes sense considering Bungie views it as a sequel, as you go against Seraph and try to unravel how and why she and the recent brood have been blessed by the lights, which works quite well as a premise, seeing as Seraph is a great villain. They also completely reworked the campaign system, switching to a mission, no filler quest, more standard way of doing things, with the option to switch between normal difficulty when you can over and under level each mission with no modifiers or any special things, being the normal campaign experience, and legend difficulty, where every mission is at a fixed level, usually about 15 under, and enemies have higher health, some are turned into mages, the radar is disabled, the chaff modifier is active, and one or two modifiers relating to the mission's main enemy type, and the main addition to difficulty, multiplicity, which limits revives and makes it so your enemy health will scale with the fireteam size. These changes to the campaign also come with some rewards. Missions are changed to be more structured around encounters like raids are. Most missions featuring 2 to 3 main encounters which reward 1 to 2 chests depending on difficulty with gear and infusion materials. Then if you beat the campaign on Legend, you'll be rewarded with a full set of gear, a 30 blue power cap, an emblem, and a choice of one of the 2 new exotic armor pieces. But everyone did it for the power bonus. Content was pretty good. We had a seasonal launch day which you could launch into right after the first mission, which despite having a luckily short seasonal quest was still relatively fun. The campaign was about an hour per mission if done on Legend, and as said prior to this was pretty good. The raid I personally think is the best one in the game. Most of the weapons are pretty good. There's 6 new exotic weapons, 8 if you count the seasonal ones, 6 new exotic armor, 3 of them being status fiend, and all 3 of them being best in slot for that subclass. Witchqueen also started the Light 3.0 upgrades, which I won't go into as I did that in the last 2 videos, but it's worth noting that here is where the game took a massive shift in overall difficulty, which spiraled after next season. And PvP started to see a complete reversal of almost all ability changes made in the 30th anniversary update, and as such suffered more in the Fusion, Lawrence Driver, Omniopulous, Lord of Wars map that was going around. Which apart from Fusions, which got hits mid and next season, took most of the hits to get rid of. Lord of Wars being killed in about Plunder, and Lawrence Driver taking up to Seraph to finally catch enough. And it's still pretty good. Before going into the seasons, however, I need to talk about the raid. Father Cypher was the raid that came with Witchqueen, and suffered massive server issues day 1. think the first 5 hours of the raid it was practically impossible to play the game, and as such, impossible to play the raid. Of course, if you got in and made progress, but these server issues stopped basically everyone. Because of this, they introduced the 48-hour contest mode, extending the VOW contest mode for an extra day, and moving the Star contest back a day to Fridays for the day-long raids. For VOW, I think this was a good idea as it allowed the people that would have not been able to compete because of the server issues actually still do contest mode. However, for the later races like Kingsfall, it's more of a case-by-case basis of whether people actually care about it or not. VOW in general was a pretty decent raid, with the main highlights being the 3rd and 4th encounter, and the 4th encounter having Wilk, which is probably one of the best bosses in the game. Both in writing, as we actually get to see his character during the raid, and also in actual mechanics. The raid wheel was also very good and craftable, as Witchqueen introduced crafting to the game, which allows you to, instead of just grinding for a 5/5 weapon drop, instead grind for a certain amount of red border drops, previously being 3 for non-upgrade and seasonal weapons, now being 5 for all weapons, and then make the exact weapon you want with the exact barrel, mag, perks, and masterwork that you want. The issue mainly comes in with the stat increases and enhanced perks, which will be an adventure for later, as right now we need to talk about. So, Season of the Haunted, where basically all the problems began. The vast majority of issues that affect the game started here, and still have not been fixed. Personally, I think Haunted is the worst non-launch season to ever exist. It is absolutely garbage in every way, and the only two things I even liked from that season are the weapons and Solo 3.0. And it is always funny when people say that Plunder was the worst of Year 5, because almost always people's issues are things directly caused from Haunted. Burnouts, likely due to Haunted. PvP being bad, Haunted. PvE being bad or boring due to ease, Haunted. It is almost always one of those, and I am not saying Plunder was a good season, it was probably average at best. However, Haunted can go. With that runs out of the way, let's get into why it's actually bad. In Haunted, your main 2 options for content are Patrol the Leviathan, where you can do patrols, run around looking for chests in order to get keys, which unlock bigger chests. Said bigger chests will give you one of the newly repriced and now craftable menagerie weapons, which 99% of the time when they drop as a red border and require you to spend 8 weeks running back and forth on the same route to get what you actually want. It's also Nightmare Containment, a public event where you kill waves of ads with about 2 HP until a boss spawns, and repeat until the final wave where the big boss will spawn. That will grant you actual seasonal loot, ascendant alloys, and drops, say, material that you take into the other piece of content, which are repeatable story missions where you go to therapy with the Crow, Savala, and Kyle, which is incredibly boring. Some parts of the story are interesting, like Kyle and Callus' relationship and Savala's son, but the rest I actively couldn't care less for. And the missions themselves are just kind of boring too, they just go from room to room killing ads and maybe activating a switch or two after a dialogue box. It is as if they made the entire content loop around making the player as bored as possible, because that's all that can happen when playing that content. Anyway, your reward for the mission are a bunch of seasonal loots, which was relatively decent. Most of it wasn't good on launch, the only relevant options being the shotgun and the rocket, but by mid-season the auto rifle and the scout became pretty decent options. The menagerie weapons, on the other hand, were all best in slots, Mida and Drang being the top PvE weapons due to good frames and incandescent, and Austrian and Beloved due to being Austrian and Beloved, keeping all the good perks and making them craftable, therefore being best in slot PvP weapons. Speaking of PvP, it got a major shake-up in a bad way. First we have the Iron Banner rework, which was part of a whole scheme with Witchqueen where they reworked all the vendors, moving away from the token system and back to a reputation system where each vendor basically works like Zane 14, you rank up claim engrams and 7 drops, and in Haunted this was extended to Iron Banner and later in Seraph, Crucible. Iron Banner also had a few extras to boost reputation gains. You could use Iron Banner gear, being armor or weapons, to boost rep games, you can wear an emblem, and do the weekly pinnacles. And then, even with all of those reputation games, it was still very grinding to get higher ranks until they increased your rep gains in Seraph. Rework also brought with it new game modes, those being the return of Rift in Haunted, Eruption in Plunder, which is a streak-based mode that gives ability energy on kill, and increased amount of points and ability energy depending on how high your streak is. However, if you get above a 5 streak, you get marked, letting everyone see you, and you explode if you don't get a kill quick enough. And in Seraph, they introduced Fortress, a rework of zone control where after one team reaches a certain amount of points, the zone will disappear and a drop pod will land in about the middle of the map with turrets and a large capture zone, which will grant an increased amount of points at a quicker rate for both teams to fight over. Finally, for Iron Banner and PvP as a whole, I think these are all a good addition to PvP, and to mix things up with more party-themed game modes that are still pretty close to the normal gameplay. The main problem with Iron Banner as it stands are the rewards, since almost every drop is worthless, and Bungie refused to actually give it good drops, as shown with next season's Iron Banner drops being a 150 sky rifle nobody likes and a bow I forgot existed. The next main PvP change is airborne effectiveness, which ruined the game. Now every weapon has a stat tied to it, which determines how accurate it'll be in the air. Most weapons now are much worse in the air unless you're a Warlock, which has certainly gained decent in their accuracy since Lightfall. Titan and Hunter, on the other hand, have very little weights to build into airborne effectiveness and therefore suffer greatly. Which, okay, you just can't shoot in the air as easily, but that has massive effects on the meta as a whole. For example, before the introduction of AE, you could counter barricades and players at the back of the map by utilizing movement to get in close or above and bring them down that way. Now, because your gun is completely inaccurate in the air, you can't do that, making barricades and slower strategies the meta, being pulses, scouts, and bows. And since AE affects specials and the new long-range meta, if you want to play aggressive, a shotgun or hand cannon isn't as viable as a pulse, which will outrange an R2-2K hand cannon, whilst a shotgun will just get gunned down and felt awful until Seraph. So people now move to SMGs for lower T2K and some actual range, which then makes everything in the middle of the two range bands feel absolutely awful, therefore making the meta even worse. And then if we go back to barricades, the old strat was just a jumping over it, which now you can't because again your weapon will be completely inaccurate in the air, unless you're using a shotgun, which now Titan has multiple ways to stop you from doing that anyway, such as knockout, and it'll likely not hit because again, AE, and Guardians also have a massive hole in the center of mass, so you're even less likely to kill them. So, Haunted is where PvP started its downfall. How about PvE? Well, you now have 40% damage resistance just for having 100 resilience, which is incredibly easy to get due to Risen Umbral energy dropping so frequently and guaranteeing a high style armor, which you can focus due to the ghost mods. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's fine. Hopefully we won't introduce the best survivability tools in the game during the best season. But hey, Restoration, which can be chained infinitely and works with the armor from last season that gives you a better version of Restoration, effectively making you unkillable. That also took a little bit to get nerfed, which made PvE very easy and still does to this day. They also released a dungeon during Haunted, which was alright, but really didn't have much effect on anything, apart from basically being the start where enemies got much higher health bars. I think that basically covers everything relevant, so let's move on to Plunder. So, Plunder certainly wasn't good, but it also wasn't awful. The main problem with Plunder is its story and lack of weapons. Plunder, again, has two modes of engaging with the seasonal content. There's Catch Crash, a 6-player mode where you battle on catches with 3 randomly selected encounters and 3 weekly rotating boss fights, and Expedition, a 3-player mode where you kill ads whilst defending a drill and throw modes into a barge to fill it with treasure. Reach the next area, do it again, and kill boss. Fairly simple, fairly basic seasonal content. Now, you can also argue that the seasonal content was once again boring, and to a certain extent I agree. I personally didn't enjoy Catch Crash, but there's nothing really wrong with the seasonal content itself. The main issue again is seasonal story and gear, which we will not get into the seasonal story. Which is honestly the most nothing burger story I think we've seen in years. The story itself follows Mithrax and his daughter Ida alongside the Drifter and Spider as you'll race to get pieces of Nezarec before Aramis can collect them all. During this, you get to learn about Nezarex's past and about Aramis essentially being forced to work for a witness, and at the end we get to see Osiris revived after drinking a tea brewed from all of Nezarec's pieces. Now, the problem with this story is that apart from Osiris returning, it didn't do anything. Ida doesn't trust Nezarec after learning his past, but then trusts him again after the final week. Aramis and the House Salvation being forced into suicide missions with witness is an interesting story beat, one that isn't even built on until Seraph, where you could have easily explained it there, and it was also explained there in the way. Then there's Osiris being revived, which is important, as not only is he back, and basically the main character for the next DLC, but also the pieces of Nezarec, which were used to revive him that got used in the tea. However, Nezarec comes back anyway, so it quite literally didn't matter. The entire seasonal story could have just not existed, and the story wouldn't be affected in any way, which I personally think makes it pretty bad. Next up is the seasonal gear, which was underwhelming to say the least. The only worthwhile weapons were really the Scout and the Sidearm, both of being Vulture weapons, and were annihilated the very next season by Icarus SMG. Everything else was either too niche or just not good enough. For example, No Reprieve and Celeste by Pitch Glass. There was also a mass burnout this season after a multitude of bad changes, the seasonal model, lackluster weaponry, the story, and general content. A lot of people just got burnt out and therefore didn't know the season as much, which is a theme that will repeat itself in Season of the Deep, although significantly more justified. We also got Kingsfall this season, which had some slight reworks to the mechanics, but it was generally the same raid. Oryx literally being the same fights, just a raid damage phase, which is mostly fine considering it's a good raid anyway, and it had the main good guns of the season. Finally, we have the main PvP change of the season, which was skill-based matchmaking. Plunder introduced with it skill-based matchmaking and Arc Titan, but mainly skill-based matchmaking. This, unsurprisingly, was an awful addition for any dedicated PvP player, as it's its own kind of worm, so I would choose to leave it alone until the PvP section later on. But for now, the main issue is bad connections, unfun matches, and just generally worse experience. So with that out of the way, it's time to talk about the last and best season of Witchqueen. So, Seraph was actually quite a good season. It was mainly host to a bunch of smaller changes that made the game better, buffs to stasis, small levels to OP weapons and abilities, and changes to AE, making it so you can actually shoot in the air, admittedly still worse than pre-AE, changes to SBMM, adding fire team-based matchmaking, changes how they actually balance content, with it now being made for Rock Guardian's power in mind, so it's actually fun instead of just boring, new battlegrounds that are actually fun to do, gear that matters, and story that matters, and so forth. The story, speaking of, follows Anna, Osiris, the Warmind, and Clovis Bray as they attempt to resurrect the Warmind to stop the Witness from claiming Warmind tech and destroying the Traveler using it. We end up getting a lot of lore between the Brays and a bit into Osiris adjusting to the post-Beyond Light world, Seraph in general, and Aramis's waning allegiance to the Witness, and Clovis Bray creating the Warmind as a super weapon to control the Traveler, and also attempting to combine himself with Warmind, which should make him unstoppable, before Anna cuts him off, which then causes us to sacrifice the Warmind and all Warmind tech to stop the Witness from, as said before, blowing up the Traveler using the Seraph station surrounded by warstats above Earth that Seraph has control over, which then ends in one of the best cutscenes in the game's history. Next up is the actual content. More battlegrounds, but this time they're actually fun to do. A weekly mission where you go into Seraph Bunker around the Iron Temples area and actually go into the Iron Temple at one point, and another weekly exotic mission for Revision 0 on the Seraph Station, which isn't a lot, but the main part is that it's fun to do alongside the game actually being enjoyable. This season as well, the season loot was all very good. There's Retrofit, which despite what some might say is a very good machine gun, Disparity, which marked the return of the Hake full burst pulse with the best full burst pulse in the game, sitting at a nice 95 range with Headseeker, Killclip, and Desperado. There's Judgment of Kelkorath, which was the introduction of close to melee, making it the best glaive at the time. then Path of Least Resistance, which is the first Arc Legendary Trace, which has a Board Shot, and finally Fire and Forget, being a stasis free burst linear. There's also Tripwire Canary, but that was unfortunately very mid. The Icolos weapons were returned as well, being craftable and all have their own unique spots. Icolos SMG was the best SMG until Lightfall dropped. The Icolos shotgun comes with Cascade Point, which makes it shoot quicker, making it a very fun weapon. Icolos Sniper has Overflow Focus Fury, so it's a nice sniper DPS option. And finally, the Icolos hand cannon exists. We got another dungeon, which truly started the trend of dungeon bosses with way too much health, as unless you're running pure meta, the first boss would take like 6 damage phases to kill solo. But other than that, it didn't have much effect on the game as a whole, apart from giving us the first legendary 120 Scout Rifle, and it being great for speedrunning due to the mechanic just being buff shoe object, and can be optimized heavily. Apart from a few small things, that's really it, which will bring us on to the main important parts of this video. Bad. That is how one should describe Lightfall. From bad strike reworks, difficulty changes, awful story, awful easy buggy raid, zero PvP content, guardian rank system that doesn't mean anything, same for commendations, and a mod system that is just objectively worse. Oh, we have Strand though, and so it's okay, we don't need Strand. For the campaign goals, right? It needs the Veil, we just need Strand. So the Strand campaign. In Lightfall, the Witness attacks the Traveller, backed up by the Reborn Disciple Callus, and his Cabal Loyalists, now known as the Shadow Legion. The Witness eventually makes its way to the Traveller during the fire, as basically nothing can damage it, and the Witness gains some sort of vision upon touching the Traveller, we still don't understand, and Callus with Shadow Legion gets sent on their way to Neomuna, which we find out exists last season. Osiris chooses to go on a suicide mission following them, and we become a stowaway on the Cabal ship of Osiris to make it not a suicide mission. Which then brings us to a mission where we must stop Callus from communing or stealing or doing something with this thing known as the Veil, because it does something. Don't know, it's never explained, but everyone else knows what it is. We spend all the time that could spend explaining it on Strand, which is an element we find in Neomuna that we spend the entire campaign learning about. In a way, we stop Callus from doing something the Veil, which doesn't actually matter because our ghost just does it anyway, which then allows the Witness and its army to enter a portal into the Traveller. And then everyone acts sort of lost and it's all over for about 5 seconds, and then we're immediately back to normal. I still really didn't get why some people tried to defend that, but anyway, the campaign then leads to the Season of Defiance story, where we follow Nisrax, Crow, Marasov, Amanda Holiday, and Devon Kay rescue prisoners which the Shadow Legion took for some reason, which leads to Amanda Holiday's death and a bit of Aramis content. The main part is Amanda's death, because we now have Amanda Holiday Explosion Gift. There's also the class traders, which they're fine, I guess. One of them dies, which is meant to be very emotional. But we barely know who they are, and the other one is, well, they're just Kate 6, but then funny. The content for Lightfall was lacking. We got one new strike, 0 PvP maps, one raid, and one new location they tried to make interesting. Which the problem with Neomuna is that it's just another place to get red borders. We just ran around doing patrols and one event, which said event is fun, but that's it, and it's less fun anyway because they added a permanent negative 15 power to the patrol zone for some reason. There were also basically 0 new weapons in Lightfall. It came with basically only reskins. That includes the raid weapons. We also had Strand and a couple exotics. The armorons are alright for Strand, and it's quite nice we actually got subclass exotics. The DLC the subclass comes out, but all the weapon exotics are irrelevant on release. Apart from Quicksilver, and Quicksilver isn't even actually a Lightfall exotic. Normally I would forgive them for things like reskinning weapons, but this DLC was £50 at base, which used to be the deluxe edition price that included all seasons, and said deluxe edition is now £90, which Fine, it is more expensive to make content now, but I also expect more content for that much of a price, and actual original content when, again, I'm paying twice the price of Taken King for an expansion. Then there's Strand itself, which is actually quite nice off the rip. It mainly plays as an evolution of status and is quite fun. In PvP, Hunter is a bit of a learning curve, but once you get it, Strand Hunter is genuinely one of the most fun subclasses in the game. And in PvE, all subclasses are really good, but mainly revolve around Suspend, apart from Warlock DPS, which actually matched with Starfires at the time. It's also very fun to use, so that's good. They also took some time to balance some abilities, and whilst I do think they are better than before, Arc Titan is still a thing in the game, and therefore all those changes barely matter. Another positive was a slight rework to crafting, where they removed all the crafting materials. So now if you wanted a red border, you just needed to claim it, and when you would have crafted, you just needed glimmering cores to select perks and such. Unless it is a red weapon where you still need harmonic alloys. Also make the red border grind generally better, as red borders drop more often and only red borders you need to drop. There's also the rework to have seasonal loot drops, requiring you to use keys instead of seasonal currency that would give you high stat armor. And if a weapon dropped, it'd also be a guaranteed red border until all of them were obtained. Due to this, they removed Umbrella Engrams again in Lightfall, changing these seasonal vendors to the same vendor system as the rest of the game, which I do think is an improvement. Then there's the raid, which is very bad. Ray of Nightmares has one main mechanic. You go to a plate and melee the floor, and go to the next plate, melee the floor again, and there you go. Add in a secondary mechanic or white mechanic with each encounter, and you have most of the raid. The only unique encounter, and a main one, is the third, where you move around planets to eventually damage the boss like Caretaker. Because of the raid having such simple mechanics, however, it is by far one of the easiest raids ever, with its only difficulty coming from the plethora of bugs. Which, if you don't think it's buggy, go do second encounter challenge or even just one run of Nezarec, because I can assure you he will bug out. And yes, Nezarec got revived in Lightfall. He appeared a bit on New Mina and was in the raid. I will say now, I do like Nezarec, I think he's a well-written character, and I like how he existed outside of the raid, unlike Rook. However, it completely deleted any reason for Plunder to have existed whatsoever. So that's great. Season of Defiance, which I mentioned earlier, was released at the same time as Lightfall, and was actually alright. The battlegrounds were fun, and was basically a carbon copy of Risen, but it wasn't exactly bad, and it's a DLC season. Then there's the difficulty changes, which I absolutely despise. Not because they actually made the game more difficult, I just think they're generally bad for the game. In Lightfall, they completely changed how activities scale with difficulty. For example, they removed Adept difficulty, so now there is just Hero, Legend, Master, and Grandmaster for Lightfalls, and instead of just needing to reach Pinnacle level to be ready for all activities, Legend and Master are now just 40 levels over the power cap, meaning unless you hard grind the artifact levels, you will be underleveled for most if not all of the season. I play constantly and I'm pretty sure I only hit plus 20 artifact level a few weeks ago, and it's pretty much the end of the season. Meaning if I wanted to grind per se Lost Sectors, I'd be underleveled for half the season and just barely on level for the next half, which I think on its own, that's bad. But you know, it's viewable. They also put a -10 and -20 power deficit on a bunch of activities, going from Dares of Eternity with a -10 to Master Rates with the -20, which basically don't do anything to affect difficulty, it just makes it more tedious to kill enemies with a meta loadouts on, as we're still so powerful even after you nerfed the 40% damage reduction down to 30, that it basically doesn't matter. They also added Surges, which give us a 20% damage buff depending on the weekly Surge elements, and it completely removes any reason for the -20 in the first place. Which is why they need to nerf the stuff that makes us excessively overpowered for all the game's content instead of just slapping contests on everything in the game. However, with that out of the way, it's time for the final part of the timeline. Season of the Deep. Honestly, an alright season plagued by Lightfall. We've probably got the best seasonal story. We've got missions and cutscenes, getting us insight into the winners and the veil. different and relatively fun seasonal activity, with sadly one boring one, and a bunch of more interesting weapons which aren't particularly good but do feel a niche and satisfy newer players. Starting with the story, you follow the half-taken Sloane, Drifter, Saint 14, Saladin, and Savala as you work to Coral and decipher the messages Asher, Sloane's Leviathan friend, is trying to give us in order to figure out the witness's purpose and how we stop it. Which is a simple premise but does work fairly well, and both the witness and the final cutscene are fairly good. The final one did reveal something that was obviously going to happen, but it was still pretty good nonetheless. Content-wise, we have Deep Dives, a roguelike mode where you traverse through 3 floors, doing certain tasks and grabbing buffs along the way, whilst gaining a power deficit for each floor you go down, increasing the rewards, which you can increase further by interacting with a Toland orb, doing a small mini task, and completing the round before the timer stops. Again, I don't like the power deficits, but that and the rewards are my only complaints for the activity. However, Salvage is basically what Catch Crash was. We either have the rig or the ecology, where you again go around doing tasks and kill infinitely respawning waves of ads until a meter fills and you go kill a boss, which again is very boring and unrewarding. As opposed to last season, where you got red borders pretty commonly, you just get armor. And a new season, where as a hardcore player the weapons are very appealing, makes me want to do the seasonal content less, because it's easier to just do other stuff that I enjoy for more engrams and a higher chance of getting red borders. And since I mentioned them, let's move on to the weapons, which aren't very good this season. There's a few picks, sure, but most of them are just not it, at least coming from the perspective of someone who already has better gear. As a new player, however, the seasonal offerings are great. They're all very easy to obtain, with fun perk pools to offset the generally bad stat pools. I think a good example of this would be the new Void 120 targeted reduction compared to the bottom dollar. Both are free to play, both have decent perk pools for both PvE and PvP, both feel good to shoot. However, bottom dollar is better in both a perk and stat sense, but is harder to obtain due to being a gambit weapon with a massive perk pool. Unlike targeted reduction, which has a very focused perk pool, is craftable and with the right roll can match a bottom dollar or even igneous hammer for that matter. Same with the real spare rations. To a lesser extent, as it isn't craftable, unlike the Echolos weapons from Seraph, it has the worst stats out of all the free-to-play 140s, but it's still decent in the perk pool section, mainly speaking in the next season sense. And because it's spare rations, it feels amazing to shoot despite being the worst, and comes from claiming it's from seasonal engrams at the vendor, making it far easier to obtain Vaporina and a Judgment, justifying its worst stats to an extent. Even for hardcore players, however, there are fun things to mess around with, such as the seasonal sniper, which, despite being a 140, can get max aim assist on a frame which already has very high aim assist compared to normal snipers. There's the SMG, which will contend with even more next season and is still pretty fun now, and the Strand Sword with Hatchling, which is just generally fun. You also get a dungeon, which is fun and utilizes the war mechanics I didn't beat, but apart from the bosses having more health than Miserak and another really good rocket launcher, it's once again not too remarkable. And that describes the season really. There wasn't really anything remarkable about it outside of story beats, and they're over, so there isn't much left to do as the season didn't bring much. The exotic mission was interesting, but nothing compared to the likes of Zero and Wishman mission, and a rewarded mid, possibly sleepily exotic, so we aren't exactly ending on a high note, and that brings us to the end of the timeline, which means it's time for the actual content. So, Beyond Light sparked a new direction for Destiny as a whole, one that would not be realized until the year of the Witchqueen. That direction moved from the gameplay leadership focus of the past to becoming Baby's first MMO, with story becoming far more important season over season. And I believe that is just actively unhealthy for the game as a whole, as Bungie have essentially abandoned a large portion of their dedicated player base and started of nickel and diming all the new players who still struggle to play the game because Bungie haven't improved the new player experience since Beyond Light launch, and it's still awful, with even long-time players struggling as to what new players should do when starting the game. So with that in mind, let's just go to talking about PvE. PvE as a whole has gotten better in some places and much worse in others. Starting with Strikes, they added Battlegrounds to the Nightfall and Strikes playlist, which does spice up the playlist. However, Battlegrounds are just kind of boring outside of the post-Seraph Battlegrounds. They all generally follow the formula of kill entire room of ads, go to objective, kill and sit in a room full of ads as an objective progresses, kill another room of ads, and then kill the boss. And it gets very boring when all of them play the same and you have to kill effectively every enemy just to force a 10-minute clear in the normal Strikes playlist. However, they're overall beneficial to the playlist for anyone who enjoys them. However, for me, they are just a skip. Keeping with the Strike theme, Nightfalls aren't very useful anymore. Starting pretty strongly in Beyond Light, with each adept being top tier, one would expect them to keep the same momentum going into Witchqueen in the future. However, during the year of Witchqueen, they suckered out all the good Nightfall weapons and brought in a bunch of new ones that, whilst decent, were power crept into oblivion by better options that already exist. Using the current loophole as an example, there are 2 drops worth getting because there is no replacement for them. There's Buzzard with Overflow Kinetic Tremors and Hangzhuri with Shoot-to-Loot's Kinetic Tremors. They are pretty much only used for the Nightfalls, however, so if you're getting them, just use them there. So if there's any overall worthwhile loots, they'll be pretty decent. However, the rest have replacements that are on par in how good they are and are usually easier to obtain. There's Swarm, where its best perk combo is just the worst version of Terminus Horizon, which comes from Spire. There's also 7 Seraph Saw and Playing Stride, which is a better frame and craftable. You could also get a Commemoration if you don't mind the fact that it's Void instead of Arc. There's also Wendigo, but you can get the same grenade launcher but craftable Arrow Defiance Battlegrounds, and even as a PvP weapon, you're better off just buying one of the mini God Roll memory interdicts Banshee keeps selling. Loaded Question came back this season. Started Techian Force with a new fusion perk that Loaded also has, but Techian does it better as you can shoot your entire reserves without loading, quicker for about the same amount of damage. And then if you want the original roll that is still power crept by the mass amount of Reservoir Burst fusions, especially the one from last season that can shoot half its reserves with Reservoir Burst active without reloading. And then there's Braytech Osprey, which is actually decent. However, they also released 2 rockets this season that just do what it does better. One is Apex, which is craftable and has a reconstruction bait and switch. The other is from Ghost of the Deep and has Envious Assassin bait and switch, making it better than both rockets. So the loot isn't great, but the activity itself isn't doing great either. Legend of Masters suffer from the power deficit mentioned earlier, meaning they can take as long as Grandmasters to complete at the start of the season, meaning you may as well just wait for Grandmasters to drop anyway, because Grandmasters are incredibly easy now. I was getting 10 minutes Disgrace clears on Grandmaster and 15-minute Fallen Saber gears with underleveled gear on, and I didn't even notice. And that is basically the case with the rest of the game. Difficulty balancing in Destiny has always been interesting, but this year, all the low-level content is legitimately more difficult and or tedious than the high-level content. Things like contest raids and Grandmaster Nightfalls are easy, whilst just struggling to kill enemies on New Minute Patrol. It's a bit strange, really. Seasonal burnout is at an all-time high despite efforts to fix it with different activities like deep dives and fishing, which I wasn't able to fit in during the deep section. Crafted weapons still outclass most of non-crafted weapons, and the seasonal grind is entirely focused on getting red borders and crafted weapons. Lost sectors now take twice as long to complete as they did pre-Lightfall, with only a small increase in exotic drop chance, making them far more undesirable for the average player. The game in the last year has moved vastly towards ability spam and heavy build crafting around abilities. If you look at the top PvE builds, they all skew towards becoming invulnerable and spamming abilities which can kill entire waves of ads instantly. And resilience in current content is fine. You could argue it should be 20% and I'd agree, but mostly it's fine. However, being able to, as mentioned before, wipe an entire wave of ads and then heal to full health instantly or just blind freeze to spend the next wave, that is the issue with the difficulty currently. Primaries are garbage. Their output doesn't compare to specials and abilities unless you're using an SMG, which are the only primaries that compare with specials still. So in most situations, it's actually just better to run double special as you get more heavy, which is something seemingly being fixed in Season 23, whether it be decreasing the amount of heavy you get with specials, or actually increasing the amount you get with primaries is still to be seen. Dungeons are generally better than before, but are now separate from the DLC and paid for content. We do get 2 per year though, which are farmable until the next one comes out. We also get a unique armor and weapon set with each one, and they're honestly more like mini raids than ever, which is also noticed with the ever-increasing health bars of dungeon bosses, where we're at the points where the newest dungeon boss has more health than Nezarec. However, when having to pay for them and the bosses having too much health are the main complaints towards dungeons as a whole, I feel they're in a pretty good place. There's also Go to the Deep and Spire only being able to kill us with one-shot exploders or pushing us off the map, but that's more a problem with us being way too overpowered again than the dungeons themselves. Then there's the raids, which have been very on and off the past 3 years. DLC was alright, but easy. Vogue was boring after a few clears because it was easy. Val and Kingsfall were pretty good, and Ron kind of just sucks. The last 3 raids have been plagued by crafted weapons, removing the need to do master raids as you can get the same gun via just crafting it. And yes, you can change the run adepts into being craftable weapons, but are you really going to do a master run, grind for the right roll, change it into a crafted weapon, and then grind the levels up just for a plus 10 stat bonus, when you can just do the normal one for 5 weeks at most to make the exact thing you want? Adept enhancing is an improvement for sure, but just crafting the base version outweighs it. That then brings us to crafting, which then brings up an important discussion. Was it good for the game? On one hand, crafting has made a lot of loot irrelevant as the ultimate power creep move. As you know, why would I grind Grass of Avarice for a God Realized Luna when I can just craft an Ostrina, which is only slightly worse because it's missing a damage perk? And the argument can be applied to basically any gun in the game. How next season, once the Zoom nerfs are out, compare the Immortal and Rapacious Appetite. The Immortal will come out stronger, but when it's such a close battle for such an easy to obtain weapon, one is to ask whether it's worth going into trials for a new world of the Immortal when it can just use Rapacious and be about as effective. But at the same time, isn't that a good thing? The reduction of RNG down to just grinding a certain amount of rep orders as opposed to months or even years of doing the same activity to get that exact 5/5 god roll of something like Apex Predator or Techian Force. Now you just have to grind your chi enough to get 5 rep order drops and you're done. If you don't want to, you never have to play the raid ever again, and if there's a meta shift away from your niche incandescent bait and switch scorch damage roll, you can easily change it on the fly with a few materials instead of being forced back into the grind. A good example of that is my Ostrina, and next season changing it from rangefinder, which I no longer need, to Zen Moment or opening shot. Which, I think that as a system is fine as a way if you have the dedication to grind as a guaranteed way to give yourself that 5/5 god roll. The problem mainly comes into effect when talking about the other benefits of crafting weapons in Destiny, the enhanced perks and stat bonuses. Now, the problem with this is that every weapon is now on par with adept weapons. Once you get a crafted weapon to level 20, it'll gain +2 in every stat that is in Masterwork stat, same as adepts. And whilst adepts have the adept mod for extra stat bonuses, enhanced perks also give a similar stat bonus, but only +5 in most cases. However, those stat bonuses can be stacked and split across the different stats. So, using a stringer again, you can either use Enhanced Eye of the Storm and Rangefinder for +5 in stability and +5 in handling, to split them across 2 different places it needs those stats, or you can have Enhanced Eye of the Storm and Zen Moment for +10 stability, which effectively gives you an adept stability mod. And, unlike adept weapons, you can actually run normal weapon mods with it, so you wouldn't lose out on running Icarus Grip like you would if Ostrina was a normal adept weapon. So we now have an ever-increasing list of weapons that are now power-creeping adept weapons, which removes a lot of the desire to chase adepts and normal weapons. So I feel Bungie definitely needs to take a look at adept perks and stat bonuses because it's becoming more and more of a problem with each season. Next up on the list, events. I'll leave monetisation for its own section, but events are incredibly boring now, apart from Guardian games. Solstice is made into a shallow representation of its former self, but beyond light, completely removing any semblance of armor grind from the last 3 years. Witchqueen decided to rework the event into a place to get easy high-style armor, and the actual activity, Bonfire Bash, was changed to only have enemy spawns cover the main courtyard, remove chests, and have everything revolve around killing bosses to throw orbs as they spire. Normal Destiny stuff. Except it's so boring and unuseful to do this event ever. You can wipe the entire phase of enemies with 2 grenades, and if not, there'll be like 5 enemies left, so the Bonfire Bash is just brain-dead content. And the actual armor focusing is useless, as you can just spend engrams at the helm to get as good, if not better armor for way easier. Then there's Vessel of the Lost with 1 good sniper and Braytech Werewolf. Most everything else is mid, and they've already given everyone a godroll sniper. The activity is also boring. You just run around a lost sector killing bosses for 10 minutes with no way to speed up the timer if you kill all 20 bosses. Then after the timer is gone, you kill the final boss for event currency for a lore book, whilst the max currency is gained from just using one. Which you know is a totally better design than the Infinite Forest. Building has stayed the same, which thank god. However, the rewards from that aren't very good either. And then Guardian Games is actually decent. Of course, there's the class competition, which as we know is rigged, so I won't touch on that. But we have match-made Legend Nightfalls with medals and leaderboards and a Mayhem active, which is very fun and a nice way to get Nightfall loot, and class-based Supremacy, which lets you just play normal Supremacy for progress, and is again fun. Of course, the rewards are once again nothing to get too excited for, but I don't get why people say this is the worst one when it's the only decent one. Then there's the DCV. Remember when they deleted half the game? Well, they stopped doing that last year, and I'm so very upset that they removed 4 raids, 4 destinations, 7 strikes, 8 PvP maps, a 0 hour, the Whisper mission, 4 campaigns, basically every gun prior to season of Worthy, and even more. Yet they are drip-feeding it back to us and using the return of old destinations, such as Mars and Titan, as a way to get us excited for new seasonal content, especially seeing as Bungie got away with it. If literally any game deleted half of it with no way to get their own content back, they'd be slaughtered, and I can't believe that didn't happen with Beyond Light. Oh, PvP, what have they done to you? So let's go into the thick of it. What on earth are they thinking with Subclass 3.0, with SBMM, with AE, the comp rework? One new map a year and it's a long-range map in a long-range meta, and introducing the other 2 longest range maps in the game. Just literally everything. Firstly, Subclass 3.0. Why is Arc Titan even a thing? If you're bad at PvP, I genuinely recommend you go into PvP, put on Arc Titan, and just see how many kills you get just from your abilities. I did an entire other video just on the 3.0s, and when you look at them, they are objectively overpowered. You can quite literally just play PvP like it's PvE and just throw abilities everywhere, and it is very obviously unhealthy for a shooter. Then you have AE, which Bungie say is better than the old system, but is in fact just worse. Surely made it bearable, but you're literally only able to hit body shots unless you have like 60 plus AE, which you can only get passively if you're on Warlock, and it's only on certain guns. Titan, you literally can't get it, and Hunter you have to run Stranded Foot Tracer to get high AE consistently, which requires you to use your grenade and Widow's Silk to utilize grapple points. But then you're sacrificing any of your exotic that work better with Strand Hunter, like Stompies or Frosties or the Strand specific one. And even when you have 60 plus AE, that only applies to primaries. If you want a special weapon to even connect in the air, you have to get like 80 to 100 AE unless you're incredibly lucky. Because if you don't have 100 AE, you won't have 100% accuracy unless you have like a pellet shotgun or something. Then, as said before, it comes down to RNG, seemingly as your shotgun will just decide to whiff. Another thing that needs fixing is that shotguns will just randomly deal half damage for no reason whatsoever. You can hit someone in run shell range on ground, center of mass, and it'll deal half damage for no reason whatsoever, and it still hasn't been fixed since the shotgun spread reworks. Back to AE. Why is being able to put on Icarus grip and have complete accuracy a bad thing? We're able to have that basically for 5 years without issue. Feels like some higher up at Bungie got fed up with people being good at the game and stompies existing, so they decided to nerf stompies by ruining gunplay, and it has had a massive aftershock effect. Camping in one place at the back of the map where we post an infusion rifle behind a barricade immediately becomes a good strategy because you can't use movement to kill them before the fusion finishes charging, as if you drop in the air your weapon will immediately be completely inaccurate. So the people who like playing the game move to SMGs so you can actually get TTK them, and then creates the awful mare where on one end you have the highest range, highest TTK weapons, like Messenger and No Time, that kill the mid-range like auto rifles and hand cannons, so you try to use them in closer range, but SMGs delay you if you get within 22 meters, so there's this tiny sweet spot where autos and hand cannons and every other primary falls into where they are good, and it's such a sweet spot where they just don't compete. And sure, auto rifles have been buffed and hand cannons have been unchanged, but they are both bad in the current meta. People only still use hand cannons because people love hand cannons, and if you're good enough you can still technically get away with it. And that's the only reason I think more people aren't complaining as much as you'd usually see with something like the Ranked Driver, because you can actually compete, which is largely caused by AE and not being able to utilize movement to its fullest extent. And I haven't even talked about the problem itself fully, because there's all the people who were hunter mains because stompies were fun, and now you see hunters moving to the subclasses and hard meta instead of what they actually like, because that's all that exists now. Seeing hard meta subclasses and exotic armor is even worse. The next main issue is SBMM, which also feeds into this issue. SBMM is a system designed to merge players of similar skill together, which sounds fine in a competitive game, however, Destiny is not that, and SBMM doesn't work. SBMM causes connection issues, matchmaking time increases, and generally worse matches as the season go on. Currently, because SBMM thinks I'm good at the game, I am getting 3-minute matchmaking times to play matches with laggy players whilst getting absolutely destroyed because there is also lobby balancing and I keep being put on the worst team against the better players, and it is unbearable to play. Like, I quite literally cannot enjoy PvP at the time of writing because Trials is up and that removes the only normal connection-based matchmaking playlist, which is also something stupid. Why must Trials being up remove the connection-based playlist or any other playlist for that matter? Why does Iron Banner remove Trials? Even if it splits the player base, just let people play the mode if they want to. And besides, SBMM splits the player base anyway, as all the good players have to live in the connection-based playlist or just don't play the game now. And Bungie wants to make PvP as bad player-friendly as possible. And the problem is that it's working. Both AE and SBMM have made good players quit, and those systems have made new players come in to replace them. Which is disappointing, but that seems to be what Bungie, or at least the Bungie Corporation, wants. Next up is the maps. 2 returning maps and 1 new. Could you at least make sure the good ones though? In Witchqueen we got Eternity and Vostok, which are both maps that just sucks. They're too long range and basically force you onto scouts and posters, firing down lane for the entire match. In Season of the Haunted we got Disjunction, which is bad for the same reason, but plays alright when you have to do Rift. In Plunder we got Cathedral of Dusk, which is bad for the same reason, and in this season we got Meltdown, which is a good map but had its spawns ruined. Then next season we're getting our only new map with the DLC, followed by Citadel a season later, which is honestly just pitiful. Next is balancing. Weapons team, apart from AE, you're doing an alright job. Also did mention SMGs and pulses, basically covering all engagement ranges and therefore dominating the scene. You can still use other stuff, and hopefully next season's zoom changes will help with the problem, seeing as autos and cannons and pulses will have basically the same range. It really seems like the weapons team are legitimately the only team that actually care about PvP, because the armor team has left Ateus Wars and Younger Hamkaras in the game, which are both ridiculous exotics, one blocking all damage so long as you slide as your enemy, which is easy on Titan, and the other being one-shot trip mines with full ability recharge. But obviously stompies are the problem, so, nerfing them, we should get another 5 of those out actually. And then there's the ability team, which admittedly has balanced the other 2 classes quite a bit. But Arc Titan and, of course, Void Titan are still in the game and absolutely own the sandbox currently. This is the comp rework, which is basically the same as it was before, but worse. Instead of just survival, you now have Showdown and Rift in the playlist, so instead of just winning matches to rank up, you do have an actual system now. play matches to rank up, except to actually rank up you now have to win 2 of the 3 next matches. So as you can tell, it's a very different system to what it was before. It's also based on SBMM instead of an actual ranking system, which is better on an actual competitive playlist than like the casual playlist, but it does make it harder to rank up as now your matches get more difficult as SBMM plays you higher as opposed to an actual ranking system. This means you could be bronze fighting Ascendants because SBMM thinks you're good enough and then struggle for a chance to climb higher. It also causes people who shouldn't be good enough to get Ascendant who then be capable of getting Ascendant, which in the terms of a true ranking system I feel is not a good fit. There's also the rewards for it, which are good, however you only get 1 per character per week, and it makes it much worse to farm for since they aren't craftable at all. I get it's to make people play longer, but eventually people will just get fed up and sell for the next option and stop bothering for it. Like, at least make it so you can farm them for wins once you hit Adept or Ascendant, for example. There's also the many Trials reworks all going towards making a loot playlist instead of a competitive playlist. Starting in Lost, where it was actually pretty good, pretty much removing the odd loot system and replacing it with a rep system allowing you to get Trials loot for engrams and keeping fullest loot, as it usually is, just replacing the 3 and 5 rune rewards with Master materials. However, it was immediately ruined after the first week where everyone loved it. Once they added the flawless pull-away system that once you went flawless would only match you against other players who went flawless. That activated on Sunday reset and let you farm weapons without needing to go flawless again. However, it didn't work. The flawless pool made playing Trials once you went flawless horrific as the player base was non-existent due to it being mainly good players and cheaters in the pool, dragging even more people away. And then if you weren't in the pool, it was just people gatekeeping flawless for some weird reason, and people who were just bad at the game and generally annoying matches as everyone else who was almost probably about to go flawless, which just made the game worse. They also made it so you could play freelance, which is generally a good thing, however it doesn't mean you get matched against first stacks as often, and duos just as much. Then in Lightfall they added Fire Team matchmaking to Trials, which made things much better for solos, however making things worse for stacks. And in this season they updated the matchmaking more so, removing the flawless pool but now matching you completely based on connections, whilst giving flawless tickets an extra loss. So it's definitely an improvement over the flawless pool. In low population it is very unfun. At this point I'd honestly just say make Trials fully a loot playlist and make it so you can get adepts on 7 wins, only things like cosmetics and farmable adepts from wins on flawless. But otherwise, I don't think there's much they can do to make Trials better other than fixing the meta and, of course, the cheating problem. Now, the main problem with PvP at the moment is that Bungie are really just trying to make it as appealing to bad players and casuals as possible, or the people who don't play PvP and will never play PvP, so anyone who actually cares just suffers. And it's really unfortunate. The same direction as it's seen throughout the rest of the game, from PvP to the mod system rework, which I will talk about eventually, and Subclass 3.0 and Resilience. It's all really to make the game more appealing to a new audience of players, the Beyond Light, the Witchqueen, the Shape, and the Lightfall crowd, which will now stick with the game. This new generation of players who are worse, but seemingly take up a large portion of the player base now and are therefore being appealed to, which is honestly pretty bad. Of course I do have nothing against the people that don't like PvP or are bad or casual players, and I'm not a game dev, so I don't really know what's going on. Obviously they're going to chase the casual audience, the new audience and whatever, because we're reaching the final stop for a lot of long-time players. But it really feels that way, and the game as a whole is worse off because of it in all areas. Before we get to monetisation and gambit, let's go over some general stuff. Reskins. Whilst I generally don't mind reskins, since Lightfall drops almost every weapon has been a reskin. The literal exceptions are the run weapons, which kind of just build off older models, and therefore aren't really original. My main issue with reskinning though is that it's less just using the same model over and over because it is an efficient use of resources, but the fact these weapons ended up being the exact same weapon with just newer perks or slightly different stats. If you were to compare Loud Lullaby to Round Robin, for example, you'd find that they are effectively the same gun, just one is craftable with slightly lower base stats that are fixed via having keep away. And at that point, why reskin the weapon at all? Why not just reissue the weapon you're reskinning? And yes, indeed, they have seemingly listened to that criticism, as the Risk and Reckoning weapons are all different frames or in completely different slots, making them effectively new weapons with all the models. And if they can keep that up, I believe people wouldn't mind reskins as much as some do right now. The power system needs work. Whilst I don't mind it too much at the moment, it feels less like a leveling system and more like a way to make us take longer to get to the content we actually want to play, which just feels bad. However, compared to past years, it has been better due to all the activity power caps, the game just putting us at a certain level and not upping the power level each season, and making the artifact level matter in the highest end by lowering GM's level of entry and the -20 on master raids. However, again, the artifact arguably matters even more in the first part of the season, because there you have to deal with being heavily underleveled for legend and master content, instead of just being able to jump in immediately like you used to. Also, the power level not going up means there's less reason to do pinnacles and therefore get to bring friends. But being able to do what I want to do pretty much immediately is worth more for me as a primary PvP player. Mods 3.0 in Lightfall, Bungie completely rewrites the armor mod system, removing the elemental affinity locks, making it so mods generally cost less, moving to an element system instead of weapons, and completely changing combat style mods, removing a lot of them and removing the stat bonuses, simplifying the what's that remain, and creating the armor chart system. Now at launch, this was awful. We were missing core mods that were staples of builds for the past year. Since this season, however, we did get the mods we needed and it's been a lot better. However, armor charge is still nowhere near as good as the previous system. The whole simplification of a system has removed things like stat-down builds for a system that pretty much culminates in a grab orb, activate time damage buffs, that's stat bonus, and that's it. There's some slight nuance with the arms mods, as they have most of the ability focus mods like firepower and momentum transfer, but for the most part that's all build crafting in terms of mod suits now, and it's very limiting compared to how it was before, where you can make infinite melee builds with combining mods from multiple worlds of melee kills, converting it to charge of light stacks, and then converting that to melee energy, which you can kind of do now, but it's much worse than before. And I give it to them if the rework was for balance reasons. However, we are quite literally more powerful right now than we've ever been. And sure, it probably wouldn't be better with the original system. However, the main mods that give us super high damage, the surges, are still there. And if anything, we're dealing more damage, if not the same damage as before. Troll zones are meaningless. Sure, Europa, the Throne World, and Neomuna will look stunning. However, apart from Lost Sector grinding, and what reason do I have to go to any of them? Neomuna is a bit better, having a full crafted weapon set and multiple pinnacle drops. However, once you get them, there's no reason to ever come back. They maybe bring back flashpoints to make people go patrol, or add daily brightness challenges that they used to be for the tokens. It doesn't have to be a new ritual activity, but literally anything to make us want to go patrol somewhere like Nessus or the Throne World or the Moon would be quite appreciated. Sectors are also generally boring now. The power deficit and legend lost sectors starting 20 above power cap make early season lost sectors feel like a bore fest and take longer than they used to even later on in the season. Whilst there is still zero reason to touch master lost sectors apart from maybe the one Dreaming City lost sector, the Neomuna lost sectors are also just awful. They feel like running strikes back to back with how many enemies you have to kill to progress, and the increased difficulty of Neomuna makes them just take so much longer compared to other lost sectors. I absolutely hate doing them. There's also a bug seemingly with the Neomuna sectors where the respawn timer is way longer for some reason, making them even more boring to sit through, and I'm someone who generally likes running lost sectors to farm exotics, so I can't imagine the experience for someone who doesn't actually enjoy it. The lighting. In Beyond Lights, they updated the lighting for Destiny 2, which makes all the PvP maps look much worse, mainly due to the far increased bloom mainly found on Distant Shore, Radiant Cliffs, and Pacifica. If you played on those maps, I'm sure you know what I'm on about, but I will have in-game screenshots for you right here. Then there's the raid dungeon rotator, which simply doesn't work. The idea is that 6 months after a raid or dungeon releases, it'll be put into a weekly rotator, and that raid and dungeon will become farmable, hence master mode will be available with all the challenges active. However, there are currently 7 raids and 6 dungeons. How it currently works, you can only do the master raid during that featured week, which makes wanting to do something like Master Vow even more pointless, as you can currently only do it twice a season, whilst you could get a crafted Vow weapon, which is just better whenever you want. which is also the even bigger problem. You can only farm these dungeons or raids twice a season, which makes a massive FOMO, which is obviously bad. So I think they should make it so the master raid is up all the time and you can farm those raids after 6 months when the new one drops. I think rotating the pinnacle and the challenges are just fine. These servers are bad. Quite simply, since Seraph, these servers have been going downhill. They have improved recently though, I have no experience in servers, so I can't really go into depth on it, so Bungie fix Game Plus.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Now, 2 things you may have noticed. I haven't talked about Gambit, and I haven't talked about the over-monetisation. I was hoping to get this video out last month, but I got distracted with a Terraria Infernum run. So in that time, the State of the Game article is out, and the showcase will be out shortly. Now, I was going to just make the video about the showcase in mind, which, pretty fair, it is deep. However, the State of the Game article I have to talk about as it heavily relates to the next 2 parts, so let's talk about it. And it is just excuses. Bungie, you used to be able to push out multiple strikes and multiple PvP maps per year, and yes, I get you had Activision helping, but you are now literally owned by Sony with plenty of live service and massive dev teams. Can't you get literally any one of them to help with making just even one new armor set every year, or just any Gambit content? Now, if you're watching this and for some reason haven't read the actual article, let me quickly summarize it for you, and so I'll then talk about the monetization. To start off, the ritual stuff. You can now get your free pinnacles from any ritual activity. Bungie acknowledges we want more PvP maps, but because game dev is hard, we aren't getting more of them. However, we do get 1 PvP map next season and 2 new game modes. Apparently, there will be matchmaking improvements, and we will get a 4-burst Hacky pulse rifle for comp in Season 23. For Vanguard, you get medals and more battlegrounds. Good for anyone that enjoys them, and bad for anyone that doesn't. Gambit? Yeah, Gambit's fucking dead. Dropping all support for Gambit, basically. However, we will get 1 map that should have never been removed, Listen Hive and Shadow Legion in Season 23. They're also adding fire team matchmaking to Gambit, which will just make the experience much worse. Oh, and Gambit is completely optional now, and they're removing season challenges from it. We won't be getting a new armor set each year because game dev is hard and low adoption rates. However, we will get a trial set next season and a ritual set in final shape. The reason we're getting a trial set is probably because it's paid for. Game security is being worked on and they're working on cheaters. Can't do anything about that, but fair enough. Server stability is being improved, which is always good. You can favor cosmetics, buy status aspects and fragments. Transmats are unlocks, new resource tab and collections that will tell you where to get certain resources. Iron Banner challenges are now split into 1 for the rep bonus and another for pinnacles. You can now get rank up rewards immediately instead of needing to visit the tower. The sandbox will continue to receive updates. I am really surprised, honestly, I didn't really continue to update it. Bungie's goals are currently to increase adventure, bring challenge back to Destiny, enrich their content, and connect their players. The entire thing is really incredibly out of touch. Literally nothing addressing issues with the game, and anything it does is the complete opposite of what we want, such as 0 Gambit support, and we can't make more PvP maps. Now, I don't want to be an armchair dev, but if making PvP maps, armor sets, and Gambit content is too hard and pulls away from other parts of the game, is it really that difficult to hire more people for the game or get another studio from Sony's lineup to come help? If it's genuinely impossible, I will happily be corrected, but it's kind of hypocritical when we look at the monetization. Remember when Eververse was first added in Destiny 1 as a way to pay for events and the free updates after DLCs? Now the events content is Eververse. So during Shadowkeep and Beyond Light, Eververse and general monetization actually wasn't that bad. Ryan Grams were purely earned, and you had a decent amount of bread dust, and they weren't that intrusive. We just introduced seasons in Shadowkeep, and they were pretty worth the seasonal cost, especially when you can get all of them for just £20 more than the standard DLC cost. However, now, the Eververse page has gotten slightly better with more bread dust from seasonal challenges in the Battle Pass. However, again, just the standard version of Lightfall costs the same as Shadowkeep Deluxe Edition, whilst the Lightfall Deluxe Annual Pass Edition costs currently £79. Now you can argue, oh well, it costs more because of the seasons. You also get the dungeon, and the dungeons are £20. Well, prior to the 30th anniversary, the dungeons came with the DLC. Now I have to pay an extra £20 for a dungeon pass that's completely separate from both DLC and the seasons. Whilst I appreciate resources and money go into them, and dungeon quality has increased massively, when you connect the dungeons to the seasons and then make us pay so much more, it feels much worse. Then there's the season pass increase, which went from about £10 in silver to $13 and $15, depending on which bundle you buy. And again, yes, seasons have increased in content, and the overall quality of Deep is better than what we've seen in Shadowkeep when the price was set, but the rest of the game completely sucks. And it also brings into question, is Final Shape going to be £100 for the Deluxe Edition? Because it's a £20 increase over the year. And yes, that's counting the DLC season, as you no longer get that with the DLC, and it's a separate buy again. Next, the actual content inside Eververse. As whilst I think the actual design of Eververse is as fine as we'll get, the content is definitely not. First up, when can we get 3 completely unique and good-looking entire armor sets this season from Eververse alongside multiple finishes, exotic legendary ornaments, 6 sparrows, 6 ships, 6 ghost shells, 6 exotic emotes, 6 legendary emotes, 3 rare emotes, multiple ghost projections and transmit effects, 2 exotic armor ornaments per character, and 8 exotic weapon ornaments per season, totaling in 12 armor sets, 24 ships, sparrows, ghost shells, exotic and legendary emotes, 12 rare emotes, a multitude of projections, transmit effects and finishes, 8 exotic ornaments per character, totaling in 24 exotic armor ornaments, and 32 exotic weapon ornaments a year. However, we can't get 3 armor sets, 1 for each character, that are reskinned 4 times because game dev is hard. I completely understand that Eververse people are probably not the same people doing PvP and gambit content. However, I firmly believe they would be the people designing armor sets and general cosmetics. So I feel that there's a little bit of hypocrisy there when we get all these cool, amazing cosmetics every season, which far outweigh the amount of cosmetics we can obtain by playing the game and ignoring the cash shop in numbers and how good they tend to look. But we can barely get 1 new ritual armor set a year for each activity. Well, I haven't even mentioned the event card, which seems to be 1 exotic emote, 1 shader, which I also haven't mentioned, 2 of either a ship, a ghost or sparrow, 1 legendary emote, transmit effect, and a ghost protection for the old price of a season, a full 1,000 silver for cosmetics that would have been part of the event, which again I get that's half the point of the event, but still. And again, I haven't mentioned the amount of cosmetics we get with each event, which, excluding the event pass content, are 3 new armor sets, 1 new exotic emote, 2 ghost shells, 3 ships, and 2 sparrows, which in the case of Solstice are just the event armor with elemental subclass glows instead of the white glow or no glow found in the base set. Again, this doesn't help Bungie's case of game dev is hard and we don't have enough resources when it comes to the, oh, people don't use it. People don't use it because the other sets that you pump out every season look far better to most than the reskinned rare armor set. And even saying that, plenty still use the ritual armor sets anyway. I quite like the Witchqueen armor sets and I think certain pieces look really good myself. I just don't think there's an excuse to why we can't get more of them. One last thing before we move to Gambit, shaders. Now I'm not going to get mad that Bungie is making more colours instead of armor sets, as colours are far more important than ghost jetpacks. What I'm specifically talking about are shader bundles. On the 8th of August, to reset, a shader dropped into the brightest section, Ego Malign. Ego Malign was previously part of a 1,000 silver bundle called the Bad Ahamkara bundle, and the main reason I imagine a majority brought this bundle was for the shader. That's been the case as far as I've seen. Now, do I really need to explain the issue with making it seem like an item was originally going to be exclusive to silver, whilst also having zero indication that it was going to end up becoming free, and removing any way of checking the brightest rotations to check that it won't become free? And they've also made 3 more of those items, so who's to say they aren't going to end up in the brightest section too? They've also taken those new shaders outside of the brightest rotation, as those have been the only Eververse shaders so far this year. I thought that was just really scummy and wanted to call that out before going on to Gambit. So, Gambit. Gambit is actually a pretty good game mode, once again riddled with annoyances and issues that will now likely never get fixed. If you haven't touched Gambit since before Witchqueen, they reworked the mode, adding damage phases to the primeval, forcing it to kill envoys, remove Gambit Prime, making it only normal Gambit, and then moving that to 1 round, increasing how much invaders heal the primeval, and generally made it worse because of these. Because no one liked this, alongside things like getting two-tapped by xenophage invaders at the back of the map, player base dropped, and Bungie basically dropped the mode. We are getting the Dreamy City map with some Hive and Shadow Region along with the normal weapons we get each season. And I could go on and rant about all these issues, but what is the point when we know nothing is likely going to get changed ever? I feel there's no point other than just talking about how dumb it is that Bungie makes the mode worse and then decides to bother not fixing it just because the player base dropped after making it worse. So, let's just get to the conclusion. So, at its current point, Destiny 2 is sorely in the state. Whether you think it's good or bad, there are a lot of problems that need addressing, and the state of the game article has not helped my hope for the future. However, I do think Destiny 2 can still be good, Bungie just needs to fix the plentiful amount of issues with the game. Again, I'd like to mention that I have nothing against any players, any devs, or anyone watching this video, and a lot of it is just my opinion, ones I know that aren't probably popular among some. However, I will let you have your own takeaway. For your opinions in the comments, I welcome it fully, and if you've watched until this point, I'd like to thank you. This video took a lot to create, and was genuinely a fun experience. I want to ask that you like and subscribe if you haven't, and I hope that you'd actually like this content if you've watched this far. I'll probably make some more fun stuff, like a boat race above next season, and adios.